Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Uncensored and Restored, Reclaiming the Environmental and Occupational Cancer Toolkit. My name is Andre Green, and I am the Associate Director for the Cancer and Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania. We are incredibly grateful to have you join us today. Now, our goal for the next hour is clear. We are here to unveil the Restored, Reducing Environmental and Occupational Cancer Risks Toolkit, and to ensure that critical discussions on environmental justice, health disparities, and evidence-based interventions remain accessible and actionable. Throughout today's presentation, we invite you to add questions into the chat, and we will address them during the Q&A at the end of today's call. A recording of today's session will also be made available later today. So for some history and for a bit of additional context, when the toolkit was originally launched in 2024, our vision was to bridge the gap between state comprehensive cancer plans and environmental exposure. We built a roadmap of evidence-based metrics to help state agencies incorporate explicit environmental and occupational risk reduction targets into their cancer plans. However, in February 2025, the work faced a significant barrier and the toolkit was taken offline for various reasons. Now, following negotiations with the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors, my home organization, the Cancer and Environment Network, assumed responsibility for hosting and maintaining the resource moving forward. In our process for reviewing the toolkit, we identified several key areas for enhancement, and to fill these content gaps, we evaluated outdated materials, integrated resource alternatives, and refined the surrounding narrative. We also built in additional modules as well. Now, with this thorough restoration being complete, the toolkit's core content is now fully updated using the best available tools and resources. With this process, this tool serves as a powerful instrument for statewide action and replication, and we encourage users to adapt these modules to advocate for the inclusion of environmental and occupational targets in your state's cancer plan. Now, during today's discussion, we are going to hear from Jeremy Aria about the toolkit's transition and its value to NACDD members. Then Molly Jacobs will provide a walkthrough so you can see how to effectively use and navigate the resource. And lastly, we will host a roundtable discussion with our partners Audrey Chan Lam and Danny Wilson to discuss their experience justifying these targets to their respective state cancer coalitions. Now, it is now my pleasure to transition to Jeremy Aria, Senior Director of Communications and Member Services at the NACDD. Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Andre, and good afternoon to attendees here today. My name is Jeremy Aurier. As Andre said, I'm Senior Director of Communications and Member Services with NACDD, and I'm grateful to be here today to speak on our role in this project and what has turned into a successful end result where a great resource is available to folks working in the public health cancer space. I'll begin with just a little bit of background on how this project came to be and speak to some of the origins, and then quickly speak to how the toolkit ended up with the Center of Cancer Environment Network, and then pass to other presenters. Um, our longtime consultants, Leslie Best and Paula Clayton, who have been involved with NACDD's work for a very long time, sort of, especially in the cancer space, got started with this effort back, I believe, in like late 2020 to 2021 through funding from our partner, CDC at the Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. We always want to acknowledge our partners and express our gratitude for their collaboration to make all of this work in the chronic disease prevention space possible. And initially, NACDD and our collaborators sought to better understand how public health practitioners view environmental health and its relationship to cancer prevention and control. There were a few specific questions that were of interest to the group at large. How do practitioners think about toxin exposure and environmental health policy? To what extent is environmental health incorporated into state cancer plans? And what resources do practitioners need to address environmental risks, among several other possible origins for the work? So we partnered with the Cancer and Environment Network, UMass Lowell, and others in a collaborative effort. Another person on our team, Lene Caulfield, helped with the build. And we conducted a survey of state cancer screening program directors and chronic disease teams to ask some of these questions. And the findings became kind of the foundation for this resource and how it was developed. And also gave us insight into the kind of information and resources that state public health teams working in the cancer space were looking for or would be useful to them. And so the toolkit was developed collaboratively with this team so that we could, with the ultimate goal of better understanding environmental risk and the connection to cancer prevention and control. And we launched in 20, as Andre said, we launched in 2024, and it was on the resource was on NACDD's website, and we partnered with our trusted vendor Rocket Camp, and they subcontracted with a web developer named Josh Murphy, who does really great work and helped us stand up the toolkit with its kind of interactive functionality at the time. And then we entered sort of this new space of complexity that public health is in now, where at the onset of 2025, we sort of moved towards a plain language approach to a lot of our work, and there was work that we felt potentially could put our funding at risk. And so we went through a process of content review, updating language, and some of that, and some of our assets did come down, and for various reasons, we had challenges with this particular resource in standing it back up. Some of it was funding related, some of it was related to executive order. Some of it was related to staffing and circumstances at NACDD. Um, and so we were, Leslie Best, our consultant, and Danny and Molly reached out to us to ask, how could we get this really valuable resource stood back up, and what would it take collaboratively to make that happen? And so we were pleased to be able to partner with the Cancer and Environment Network and UMass and Molly and Rocket Camp as well to identify a mechanism in which we were able to stand this back up and sort of pass it along to the organization, the Cancer Network and Environmental Network, to be able to relaunch. And so it's been wonderful to see that happen. Ultimately, our goal at NACDD is to ensure that we're putting valuable resources in our members' hands and connecting our members to those resources. That's part of our stated core function as an organization is two of our four core functions: providing members with valuable resources in their practice, and then connecting our members to those resources and engaging them in that space. And so ultimately, our goal was to ensure that this toolkit was available, and that we are able to raise it and height or amplify it to our members to ensure they know it's out there, and as a resource, especially in the event that their state may be in a different place, or their jurisdiction is in a different place when it comes to cancer prevention, and work in that space. And so we're grateful to have worked with our partners to help preserve and transition the toolkit and make sure it remains available to the broader public health community. It is it's sort of one of the high points of our work is when we see collaboration with our partners result in success like this. And so I want to hand back to Andre, and move on with presentations. But I would say, I'm grateful for the partnerships here. And in addition, I'll just tease out that I see Claire in as a participant who is a Rocket Camp staff member. who I'm guessing was probably involved in the work behind the scenes to relaunch the toolkit. And she's been a great partner, and Rocket Camp has been a great partner throughout our my tenure with NACDD. So thanks everybody, and I'll pass back to Andre to move on with presentations.
Thank you so much for the content, Jeremy. And I also want to elevate your um, shout out to our partners. We have a lot of them here today that we recognize, and we are so grateful. Some of you have been here since the very beginning, so we're extremely grateful to have you here for the official launch today. I am excited to transition to Molly Jacobs for the official overview of the toolkit itself. So, Molly, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andre. And thank you so much, Jeremy, for a great kind of foundational context to this work. It's been a pleasure to be a content writer, if you will, for this 2K, along with my colleague, Andre Green. I'm Molly Jacobs. I'm a director of applied research within the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, who worked under subcontract with NACDD to put together the toolkit. Let me just, there we go. And so also riffing off of Jeremy's acknowledgements, there's a number of people to acknowledge here that really were deeply involved in putting this toolkit together. Again, all of our NACDD partners, particularly Leslie Best and Liana Caulfield, my colleague at University of Massachusetts Lowell, who is now retired, but who will be thrilled that this is up and running again, Polly Hoppen. We had a really astounding scientific advisory committee that worked with us to give guidance and advice on directions and content for the toolkit. Ultimately, the final content and decisions are the responsibility of us as content developers, and now in particularly the Cancer Environment Network. And again, to the Rocket Camp team that put our text to life, if you will, in this remarkable toolkit. So the premise for this is one of when we look at cancer types that have been the focus of cancer prevention efforts over the last decades, we've made tremendous progress. So we can see that, for example, in the trends in this upper left-hand side around lung cancer. But when we look at other types of cancer, progress is not equally shared. And quite important for us working in the environmental health, environmental epidemiology, occupational epidemiology space, many of these cancer types are strongly linked to those types of exposures. And when we look at other types of cancers, at trends that are really rising over time, particularly cancers in young adults, as well as childhood cancers, it's really hard to attribute our traditional cancer prevention risk factors that are the primary focus of programmatic efforts. Exposure to the sun, diet, exercise, smoking cannot explain why we see the rise, for example, in childhood cancers. Something else is contributing to that, and we can't overlook the potential contribution of environmental exposures, particularly. So, reducing environmental carcinogens is an important cancer prevention opportunity. The logic is clear. When we stop carcinogenic exposures, we can prevent cancer. Environmental and occupational cancer exposures matter. Carcinogens continue to be in the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the consumer products that we purchase, and in our workplaces. These are contributing to cancer risk, but prevention is possible. Policies and programmatic interventions can reduce exposure to reduce environmental and occupational cancer risk. Unlike, however, many of the individual risk factors that are often the focus of programmatic cancer reduction efforts, smoking, diet, exercise, sun exposure, Reducing environmental and occupational risk is often more dependent on policy, more dependent on workplace protections, incentivizing safer chemicals and clean technologies, and pollution prevention. It's a different type of lens that we have to put on these risk factors. Prevention can advance health inequities. As we know in public health, the people with the greatest exposures are often those with the fewest resources to avoid them. And so, as we'll see in this toolkit, the cancer disparities often equate with environmental injustices, an important concept not to be overlooked. States, as well as more localized cities and counties, have tools at their disposal to act. Cancer prevention and control programs can help identify and advance opportunities to reduce environmental and occupational cancer exposures that contribute to this disease. And this is even more empowerment, meaning action at the state level, action at the local level, when we're having reduced federal attention and action on these issues. So the purpose of this toolkit is one of to enhance the development and implementation of goals and strategies to reduce environmental and occupational cancer risk within state and regional cancer prevention efforts. We see the toolkit as being of use to both state and county and local agencies, health departments, for example, cancer coalitions, as well as environmental health NGOs. This toolkit is really a call out in many ways to the organizations that have the capacity to bring to these efforts, myself including, to support broader goals and strategies that focus on risk reduction efforts. So my job here is really to give an overview and a tour of this toolkit. I don't know, Andre, if it's useful to maybe pop the link of the toolkit into the chat for everyone so they just have it and can bookmark it for the future. The toolkit is made up of essentially 7 modules. I'll go give a high-level overview of each of these. And also there's an important resource page. Every link in this toolkit that is noted is actually summarized in this resources, kind of as an easy go-to place to get the materials, the reports, the websites that are referred to in the toolkit itself. So first off is some of the functionality of this toolkit that Rocket Camp really helped us to elevate in how it looks and feels. Every module has kind of a list of key takeaways. These are really the learning objectives, what we hope people take away from each of these modules, the main point, the main messages. We have kind of a number of tools and resources that are offered. And you'll see kind of these toggle switches that allow for a more refined accordion, if you will, of resources, websites, videos, links related to many of these tools and resources. Oops, wrong button. We offer case examples, stories that kind of do the storytelling of many of kind of the themes that we're wanting to convey, and why it's important, and these are derived from the literature to help give life to some of the concepts that are being shared. And lastly, we realize that learning is very different among us adult learners. Some of us learn by having access to the resources and links and just reading what's on the website. Others like to watch videos. So we offer a range of resources to support learning and capacity building in this space. So now I'm going to just walk through, give it again a really high level overview of each of these modules. So the first module focuses on partnerships, the power in partnerships. This was really critical, what we heard from NACDD to start with, right? Many health departments are facing staffing limitations. Many health departments, for example, don't even have capacity in environmental health or occupational health. They just don't have those expertise in-house. So but that's okay to support kind of the integration of these goals and strategies where capacity is limited. It exists elsewhere. It exists in environmental regulatory departments, it exists in sustainability organizations, it exists in academia, it exists in our non-governmental organizations like SUNSPA. So the knowledge and capacity to address environmental and occupational risk factors are found in many partners. It's about expanding the base. It's about bringing more partners into these efforts in a collaborative way to advance goals and strategies to see reduction in these risks. And it's important to align the targets with the capacities of the partners themselves, right? We can only move where we have the capacity to move. So we need to think strategically about what those targets should be as a result. The second module focuses on data and reducing exposure to environmental carcinogens is one of providing clear data and information resources. So the second module is about helping coalitions find the data that really illuminate the priorities that should be considered. First, it's about understanding not just where hazards are present, but the underlying factors and connections that cause them to arise and persist. So a real foundational concept across this toolkit is holding a systems thinking lens. Doing so helps us to move beyond short-term fixes and identify opportunities to address root causes. The system of risk reduction solutions lies in the combination of factors associated with policy shifts, associated with market shifts, and associated with cultural shifts. Second, there are a range of online tools and data sources that can help us inform this process, from identifying potential hazards and exposures to understanding where the opportunities for intervention may arise. And third, this particular module is also wanting to elevate that data alone is not sufficient. We need to engage both technical experts and people with lived experience to help interpret the data from these tools and their impacts and their opportunities for change, and ultimately identifying meaningful opportunities for action. So the third module is about educating and engaging. So there are robust data. This is really about the data. One of the themes of the survey that Jeremy spoke to around what we heard back from cancer coalitions and chronic disease directors is that they didn't think that there was enough evidence to justify action on environmental and occupational carcinogens. The evidence base just wasn't there. That is false. And this module in particular is to support capacity building in that space, to provide organizations with the underlying scientific case for action, justifiable scientific case for action. And so the module points users to authoritative sources like the use of the International Agency for Research on Cancer's classification of scientific evidence with regard to its a given substance or exposure circumstances ability to cause human cancers. And scientific literature that can help build the knowledge base among our cancer coalitions to strengthen capacity in this area. And so here we have, for example, an example of a feature in this toolkit where we provide links to PubMed and looking at the state of the science, for example, over the last 5 years on air pollution, on endocrine disruptions. So these are, if you will, searches that are developed. All you've got to do is press on PFAS, and you'll see the literature associated with that particular substance and its links to cancer. And second, the importance of subject matter experts, right? Again, this is about having the data, the evidence, but also the interpretation of that, layering the expert judgment to help interpret that evidence. So including subject matter experts in helping interpret this and putting context to it is really an important asset that cancer coalitions need to include. So it's about thinking who can do that and bringing those partners to the table. The fourth module here is about an evidence-informed intervention. So the goal is to build a shared understanding, not just of the evidence itself, but what we can do. And this was another feature or another factor that we heard in the survey back from the survey results that Jeremy mentioned, where even if some entities in chronic disease programs thought that the evidence was there around causation related to environmental occupational factors in cancer, they didn't think that there was evidence around intervention effectiveness to support kind of inclusion in strategic plans. Again, not the case. So this toolkit provides a range of opportunities for intervention. These are evidence-informed interventions that are available to reduce exposure to environmental carcinogens. And what we did in this tool case is kind of interlay, if you will, kind of the hierarchy of understanding from both occupational settings as well as community settings around kind of the effectiveness of interventions, right? It is most effective to eliminate that which is known to cause cancer. If we can't do that, the best thing to do is substitute something to what we think is a safer alternative or to redesign. And if you know, each of these kind of intervention levels are also interrelated to the kind of levels by which we think of interventions happening at the individual level, happening at the institutional level, and happening within the policy level. So the toolkit provides examples of ready-made models to support goals and strategies at each of these levels, thinking about the types of interventions, whether it's focused on education or substitution, but also thinking about the interventions at policy, institutional, and individual levels. And so here's, for example, how that feels in the toolkit. We give an example of an intervention type, meaning substitution, what it's focused on, examples of objectives, as well as intervention strategies specific to that kind of context. The fifth module here is one focused on environmental justice. And this is really about building capacity to apply an environmental justice lens to cancer prevention and control efforts. So environmental justice might be a newer concept for cancer coalitions, but it builds on a principle they already understand, the importance of addressing cancer disparities. Not every environmental or cancer risk is rooted in environmental injustices, but we know that environmental and occupational exposures have been shaped by historical and systemic factors that some communities experience at disproportionate exposures and associated risks. That means environmental justice needs to be an explicit consideration when setting cancer risk reduction goals and strategies. And so the module provides tools and resources to help efforts identify communities experiencing disproportionate environmental risks and to consider equity when prioritizing opportunity for action. So importantly, our national tools to support these efforts have been taken offline or will be taken offline, probably within the next year. However, many state tools remain. And there are emerging efforts by non-governmental organizations to support the development of tools with a national lens. So that's kind of a stay tuned, but these tools are coming. And will be of support to programs, especially that might not have a state level tool of their own. So the goal is to strengthen the coalition's capacity to not ask only what risks can we reduce, but also who is most affected, and how can our strategies help address those inequities. So the last module that we developed in collaboration with the NACDD was one of bringing these strategies, these modules to life through case examples. And we featured a number of states. Iowa and Pennsylvania are one of them, and we have panelists both from those states to say how these goals and strategies were included. Audrey, you might remember this particular image. This is from one of your meetings. So we'll hear more about their stories, about how these goals and strategies were incorporated into state level plans. And just to say that, we tracked, and as we were looking for models, Andre and I kind of started to look at the frequency of state plans that had these goals and strategies, environmentally focused goals and strategies, particularly those that are beyond radon. And when Andre just looked a couple of weeks ago in advance of relaunching this toolkit, we noticed a change. There are additional states that are incorporating this focus, which is an impact that we love to see happening, and we hope to see more of it with the support of this tool. Um, when Senspa took over kind of the hosting and maintenance of this toolkit, we thought it important, given that the Cancer and Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania is a regionally based organization, to elevate that action doesn't always help happen at the state level. Regional, meaning at the level of counties, at the level of multiple counties, at the level of cities and towns, is often where this action plays out. And there is power and partnerships that are happening at that level that also need to be considered and elevated when thinking about opportunities for change. And so, with the help of our Pittsburgh Foundation and the Heinz Endowments that helped kind of fund us being able to host this toolkit, we were able to create a new module that focused more at this national or at this regional level. And it focuses on, in part, the learnings from the Cancer and Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania, which is a network of organizations working on these issues, and using the framework of the toolkit, thinking about partnerships, thinking about a lens on environmental justice, thinking about interventions that are available at the individual, institutional, and policy level to invoke change. And it features models at this level that can be replicated across the country. And so we hope that can be of value, again, to achieve the change that we all want. Again, the last kind of module in this is one of resources. It's putting every link in one place. So if you're looking for something that you thought you remembered seeing in one of these modules, you can always find it again in this resource list. And so the next steps of ours is one of just tracking this utility. We want to see impact. We want to see the growth of thinking of incorporation of environmental and occupational risk reduction into cancer prevention efforts. This is critical to making the change that we want to see. If we want to see incidence rates go down in the next decades, we have to attend to these issues. It can't be a blind spot any longer. The Cancer and Environment Network is committed to maintaining this important toolkit. We spent a lot of effort over the last number of months updating broken links. There have been a number of resources that went down since we first developed this. So we are looking to maintain the content, to update the content with new examples, new tools, new resources. So please be in contact with us if you have something to share. And with that, I'll hand it back to Andre. And thank you very much for your attention. And we hope this toolkit is of value to all of us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Molly, for your thorough overview. It's so helpful to see this actualized. And a critical theme that I pulled out from your presentation was the importance of bringing these strategies and concepts to life, giving them breath, making sure that they are actualized. And given that context, I do want to transition over to our discussion with our partners. Again, we are joined today by our Cancer Coalition partners from both Iowa and Pennsylvania to discuss their practical experience in advocating for the inclusion of these environmental and occupational targets. So I'm going to invite both Danny and Audrey to speak, but I want to start the discussion with asking the question for both of you. Could you share your experience incorporating environmental and occupational cancer risk reduction goals into your state's cancer plan? And Audrey, I invite you to come up.
I would be happy to kick us off. Hi, everybody. So pleased to be able to be here for the launch of this really, really important resource for all of us, and to share what I think is really, really exciting cancer control and sort of considering environmental risk factors in Iowa. For those of you who don't know, um, Iowa is #2 in the nation for cancer incidence, and it's one of a few states where cancer rates are actively rising. Now, I am not a cancer control professional. I lead the environmental health program out of the Center for Energy and Environmental Education at the University of Northern Iowa. So cancer control is not the world that I sort of came into, but it's one that I was kind of drawn to being immersed in my education, in my interest, in my profession, in just environment and how it impacts chronic disease. So there was this, I think, real hunger from Iowans to be addressing issues beyond individual risk factors to sort of turn the tide when it came to cancer incidence in our state. The wonderful thing about Iowa's Cancer Control Coalition, which is the Iowa Cancer Consortium, is that they are one of the most welcoming organizations that there are in Iowa. They have such a talent of cultivating a culture where all partners and organizations are welcome if they are passionate about reducing the cancer burden in the state. And so it was very easy for non-traditional partners, I think like myself, I would consider myself a non-traditional partner, to find themselves in the cancer control plan. And so we were invited to help facilitate some listening sessions. You saw the Jamboard that Molly had up in her slides, RIP Jamboard. It was such a wonderful tool to solicit feedback from Iowa Cancer Consortium members about what they would like to see in the environmental health section of the cancer control plan, Iowa's cancer control plan, and how we could move beyond just radon and tobacco smoke, those sort of tried and true, like very well understood cancer related environmental health risk factors. So this listening session really helped us figure out what our members were interested in, but then how we could start conversations around what form should it take in the cancer plan. And I think that that's where some of the challenges really started to pop up, because environmental health professionals, I have found, I think don't necessarily speak the language of cancer control professionals and vice versa. And so there were some difficulties figuring out what form the goal should take, how we could make them most analogous to existing goals that were very sort of percentage driven and cancer reduction incidence driven. Whereas our environmental health sort of metrics and goals were very much foundational, focusing on education, awareness raising, helping to articulate connections and cultivating partnerships. So it was very, very, I think, rudimentary to get everybody started. But with this work and with sort of established goals in the cancer control plan, it really has kickstarted a ton of activity in our state regarding cancer control interventions and how we all see ourselves sort of playing a part in reducing the cancer burden. The Iowa Cancer Consortium has also helped add capacity to this initiative by starting a new work group called the Cancer and Environment Task Force. And it's one of, I would say, based on my experience, one of the most energized and popular work groups, because we have such a diverse cross-section of professionals, from water quality from agriculture to public health professionals, clinicians, oncologists who are very interested in this intersection of environment and cancer. What I'm so excited about having this toolkit back online is to address some of the challenges that we sort of had when we were trying to put these goals together in our comprehensive cancer control plan. That issue of not being able to really speak each other's language. I feel like coming from the environmental health world, it does take practice to see how environment and human health are related. And I think that this toolkit does a really, really wonderful job of jumpstarting that education to allow the people who go through the toolkit to see the material to start to be able to identify or get into practice the way to identify how environment actually, influences cancer in this way. So I'm very, very excited to have this sort of literacy, this environmental health literacy, be born out of people having access to this toolkit again. But I'll stop there. I have so much more to say, but I hope that we can have a robust discussion and this sort of kicks us off.
Amazing. Thank you. We invite our partner from Pennsylvania, Danny, to speak on your experience.
Hi, thank you, Andre. Okay, I will try to be brief because I really want to hear from people and have that robust conversation Audrey just mentioned. But I do want to let you know what happened on the side of Pennsylvania and answer Andre's question about what that experience was like. And it's important to know that our experience of incorporating these goals into the PA Cancer Plan actually started years before it was even possible to do so, because it started with building relationships, as so many things do. And I can't say when those threads began because Molly and Polly Hoppin have been invested in Pennsylvania for so long, long before I had the chance to meet them. But by 2021, the three of us and the Cancer and Environment Network were planning a webinar series in partnership with the CDC and the NACDD. And the third webinar in that series was in 2022. It included Becky Kishbaugh, who's already been mentioned, who was a leader in the Pennsylvania Department of Health at the time. And we stayed in touch with Becky and the PA Cancer Control Program team. We invited them to many of our events and activities. And we spent time with anyone who was interested in learning more about environmental carcinogens because that was a new area for so many of them at the time. And then when it came time to start thinking about for them to start thinking about and working on the new cancer control plan, we offered to convene and host a group of people willing to work on what the environmental and occupational cancer risk reduction goals would be. We did a lot of drafting, a lot of editing, a lot of meetings, offering resources. Essentially, we did whatever we could to make this as light a lift as possible for the cancer control team. And it worked. So the goals were incorporated for the first time in PA history, which was super exciting. We also asked around the same time if we could keep the momentum going and start a PCC work group called the Environmental Health Work Group, and that's been active now for a little over 2 years. And I chair this work group. We're still growing, we're still learning, and we are staying busy. So we recently completed a collaborative webinar series with a variety of environmental health topics and speakers from across the state. And our work group was highlighted at a Pennsylvania Cancer Coalition full member meeting. Molly and I were able to present an introduction to cancer and environment to the full coalition, which we deeply appreciated. As Molly said, this aspect of cancer prevention is not understood by so many, even if they've been in cancer prevention for decades. So we really appreciated that opportunity. And I also want to highlight that even though the cancer control plan inclusion and our work group are still quite fresh and pretty new, we've already navigated so many changes. Of course, political changes, but also personal and professional changes for many of the people that we've been in relationship with. And so part of this toolkit and part of all of this work for us is knowing that, yes, we want to celebrate big wins, but it's sustaining them is completely different and also a really important thing to do. And so even though we didn't have this toolkit when we were initially advocating for these changes, we have it now, which is great. But our efforts and so many others, like those of the Iowans, absolutely informed what's here in the toolkit. So what took us years of relationship building and convening and drafting can now be accelerated for other states. That's the hope, because the toolkit takes the heavy lifting out of that process. So if you are a community advocate, a researcher or coalition member wanting to get environmental targets in your state cancer plan, this is your roadmap, and it ensures you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It gives you the evidence, the framing, the structure to advocate for and implement meaning environmental health goals. And as I mentioned, like we're playing the long game here. So we're so grateful for all the people who've contributed to the toolkit because we'll be leaning on it ourselves as we tend to sustaining attention on environmental and occupational cancer risk reduction strategies.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Danny, and to you as well, Audrey, for sharing your invaluable insights and experiences from your work and your respective coalitions. It's incredibly critical that we amplify and elevate these state-based wins. And as Molly said earlier, we have seen a very noticeable uptick in the states that have included environmental and occupational targets into their cancer plans. And so elevating these wins is that much more critical. Um, and as we've mentioned already, it is time for our discussion. We have about 13 minutes left. So if you have any questions for any of our speakers today, please add them to the chat and we will address them in order. Um, and to begin our discussion, I do want to offer a question to our partner, Audrey. Um, During your discussion, you elevated the energy and the electricity coming out of the work group that you are a part of. And after reviewing minutes from a recent meeting for the Cancer Environment Task Force, we were pretty impressed actually by the active participation of the consortium members. So I would love to know just what strategies does the Iowa Cancer Consortium use to foster and maintain that high degree of engagement?
That's such a great question. And I wish I had, like Danny, spoken more to the relationship building aspect of, and strength of the Cancer Consortium. But I think that um, the the diversity and the activity of the work group members is a testament to the amount of concern that Iowans have about this issue and interest in learning more about the relationship between environment and how it influences cancer development. But I also think that many of us in the environmental health space that had this interest in cancer, like the few of us that sort of engaged with the Cancer Consortium, and listening sessions, sort of helped craft the goals and strategies that went into the cancer plan, brought a lot of our cohort with us into that group. And so I think that it only took a couple of us to really build a huge following of this important topic and to think through together what we would like to work on, how we would want to intervene, and what sort of specific topics we wanted to focus this energy on. So I think it's a mix of things, but you can't overlook the importance of that relationship building. And so I think that will be my final answer, Andre.
Thank you. I think it just goes back to the first module that Molly amplified throughout her walkthrough is the critical importance of partnerships and how partnerships has to exist at the foundation for all of this work. It's extremely critical. And I know you were just speaking, Audrey, but while I have you, another follow-up question that I have is just thinking about what the future looks like, as well as evolution. Whenever Molly and I did our comprehensive review of all 50 state cancer plans, we did see that the current Iowa plan is 2023 through 2027, will be expiring next year. So I'm really curious, what strategies is the consortium currently taking to prepare for the upcoming plan revision?
That's an excellent question. And I think like Danny said, we'll be relying on this toolkit. I'd like to think that those of us who will be involved in sort of the environmental health side of things will be relying on this toolkit to think through, I think probably more in a more mature way, how to formulate some of these goals and strategies, because it really did feel like we were trying to, like trying to put the highway together while we were driving the car, right? It really did feel like we were just making it up as we went along to get the conversation started, just put something in the plan to make sure that there was a space that this could live in and for us to mature with it. And so, and with staffing transitions and just sort of this funding in chronic disease and public health crisis that we're in, it will be very interesting to see what shape, what flavor the plan takes in this next iteration. There has been in the last iteration of it, discussions of making it a living document and sort of revisiting it more frequently than every 5 years. or making sure that we are updating it properly, or making sure that new areas of emphasis or of interest of the consortium members gets represented more frequently. So there's a lot of discussion, and I'm excited to hopefully again be invited to be a part of that, because this is a really important issue for me, and I want to keep working in the intersection of cancer and the environment in the state.
Well, thank you for discussing what that evolution might look like, as well as the role that the toolkit can play in being able to be a home, a base for the Iowa Cancer Consortium, as well as other state cancer coalitions to use, and like Danny said, to accelerate some of these conversations. So I appreciate that. Throughout today's discussion, a theme that I've felt, and also a theme that's represented throughout the entirety of the toolkit, is the importance of partnership and increased engagement. And thinking about that lens of engagement, Jeremy, I actually want to pivot to you and ask, how can interested individuals get involved in addressing cancer prevention and control at the national level specifically?
Thanks, Andre. You know, throughout the call today and the presentation, you know, one thing is apparent is, you know, and that I don't always get to see, is the passion with which folks that are working in specific jurisdictions have for the work. And I think that came out in the speaker's presentation. So Iowa, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, or I think Molly, you said Vermont yesterday is where you actually are. But you know, as a national organization, we offer, you know, a membership to folks that are working in state health departments, chronic disease units at no individual cost. And we also have an associate membership for folks who are working with partner or you know local health departments in academia, even for private organizations that focus or foundations that are focused on public health or chronic disease prevention and control. And so the most logical point of interaction with NACDD in our space is through our Cancer Council. We currently have about 450 members, and our councils are structured so that there is elected leadership amongst the group. And we are also, that's another activity that's funded by DCPC. And so we appreciate that long-standing partnership that we have with CDC to enable the work of the council to kind of prioritize what is happening at the national level in the cancer prevention space and embark upon partnerships like, you know, the one we focused on today. So Danny dropped the chat to our Cancer Council in the chat, and I encourage folks participating on today's call to check out that and some of the other resources that are on our cancer pages. And if you know, let me know if you see any broken links, shoot me a message. But we're working to actively get all of that updated, including adding the toolkit to as a link out. So the old links that were on, you know, pointing to our website will now point to the Cancer Network's website. And then great looking new toolkit.
Thank you, Jeremy, for elevating the opportunity for folks to get involved at multiple different levels. So the Cancer Council exists at the national level. You can be involved in your state cancer coalition, and you can also be involved in advocacy locally. And continuing that train of thought, my final question for the panelists today, specifically for you, Danny, thinking about the more localized regional influence. The Cancer and Environment Network has a really unique experience in working to influence the state cancer plan coming from the lens of a local organization. So I'd like to hear from you, Danny. What recommendations would you give other smaller organizations wanting to influence their state's cancer plan to include these environmental and occupational targets?
Well, at the risk of being redundant, partner up and build some
Yeah.
relationships. Yeah, definitely. And that's just how it happens with us. I mean, it feels
Yeah.
like, and I also think I forgot to introduce myself. Like Audrey, I'm not part of a cancer control program, so can't join the Cancer Council. But I'm the executive director of the Cancer and Environment Network. And we're a network of about 60 organizations and some community members. And so when we have a Cancer Environment Network team together, it feels like it's the network, but it's so many other orgs and so many other people who are actually behind it and putting all those resources. I mean, you are looking at the entirety of the Cancer Environment Network staff here, which is like half of who's on this panel. So we definitely can't do it without all the partnerships that we have.
Could I jump off of that, Andre? Yeah, Danny, I think that was such a good answer. I think like I would love to emphasize something that I said earlier about that addresses your question, Andre, and that our Cancer Consortium has done an incredible job of making um, non-traditional partners feel like they have a place in the cancer plan, and that it feels like we all have a responsibility to reduce the cancer burden in Iowa. And I think that focusing on making sure that the goals that were put into the plan reflect the expertise of non-cancer control professionals really did make a difference. And I think just sort of pounding the message that public health is a team sport and that's not all being done at the county public health departments or at the oncologist's office or it's done at the Department of Natural Resources. It's done in occupational medicine settings, right? It's so much more than just sort of, I think, what we maybe are traditionally seeing in the cancer control spectrum. And so if there is a way to incorporate that kind of culture into the cancer control work in your states, I would really recommend it because I feel like it has been so empowering in Iowa.
That was so beautifully said, Audrey. And again, just it's at the foundation of the critical importance of partnerships and leveraging those partnerships with non-traditional partners as well, which we do list in the toolkit, specifically Module 6. So we do highly encourage you to go throughout the entire toolkit to get a feel for how this looks, how this feels, and how they can be applicable to your work and to your respective coalitions. And in the interest of time, we have 2 minutes left. So I want to go ahead and thank all the participants for taking time and joining us today for the exciting launch of the toolkit. And I also want to extend gratitude to our presenters, Audrey, Molly, Jeremy, Danny. So grateful, endlessly grateful for you sharing your time and expertise with us and helping us develop this toolkit. This has been a long journey, and I am so excited that we finally have this up and launched and available to our partners. Again, we hope you will take the toolkit and use it to drive meaningful change in your state. And we also encourage everyone working in environmental health spaces or adjacent spaces to get involved with your state cancer coalitions, as your voices in particular are extremely essential to our collective success. Again, we highly recommend using the toolkit. And with that, thank you for your commitment to this work. And we offer one last thank you. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Andre.